we always use theirs, but we knows his works. Is the camera ready to roll?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, good morning. Thank you so very much for coming today. Certainly want to introduce you to Brandon Watterson, our expert tech guy. Really is an amazing fellow, and thank God it's not me. But thank you for coming today. The October 4th method of the webinar for the meeting for the Estate Planning Council. We're thrilled to have today to present Stacy Allred, Senior Managing Director and Head of Family Engagement and Governance at First Republic Investment Management, and Kelly Garcia Arrillaga, CTFA Managing Director, Family Engagement and Governance. More on their presentations in just a bit, but certainly, as you can see, we've got a pretty good turnout here, so more the merrier. Come join us in person. Safe environment, and love to have you here. For many of our folks that come in person, it's like old home week. So thank you so much. For the certainly be on an alert for the members of the council for an invitation from First American Trust for their monthly Cannon Financial Institute Estate Planning Series. Great series, top presenters. Clary Red and Turney Berry are just some of my favorite speakers in the country. So be on the lookout for that if you're a member. That invite will go out in probably the next week or so. The next meeting of the council is November 1st. It's a meeting with Dustin Nichols, a partner with Brown and Streza LLP in Irvine. Dustin was one of the original legal technicians and inventors in developing the proprietary private retirement trust solution and provides administrative support platform in California. He will cover the opportunities with a private retirement trust at this next meeting. Other meetings that we've got coming up is December 6th is we've got Jenny Brad and Helen Chang of Withers Bergman, or Withers Worldwide now, who will present on year-end and other planning with charitable giving. January 3rd, we're going to have an interesting presentation with Doug Wilson of Douglas Wilson Companies and another co-presenter on the state of the real estate economy in San Diego, California, and across the nation. Obviously, we've got a lot going on with inflation, recession, whatever we have going on, and of course, using interest rates to impact the inflation, of course, causes problems over in other parts of the economy. So they'll be doing a great job in presenting that. Certainly want to introduce you all to Jason Rogers and Hope Carlson, who we saw last month, but they're key people in the San Diego chapters of Advisors in Philanthropy. They have a get-together October 27th, 11:30 to 1:30 at Morgan Run. We'll have an email announcement go out on that, but this is a joint presentation by the San Diego Foundation and AIP. And the presentation is going to be on strengthening client relationships through philanthropy. So certainly be on the lookout and join us for that. Certainly go to our website, the council's website, and update your data for each of you, and certainly take a look in there, and a lot of great information in there as far as articles and such that we have out there. Certainly want to recognize our hot topic ladies, Katie Swafford and Roberta Robinson. We're still juggling on attendance and in-person attendance, and we'll be continuing that as we go, as they let us know what's cooking out there. Pete Tentler, of course, our board member, master networker, deep relationship person, is in charge of our trifectas. And this is a group where he'll build a group of 3 or 4 people, none in the same business, but to get together for coffee, lunch, or breakfast. And I don't know if Pete's here today. David Jacobs will grab your cards. If you could, just put them on the table, and we'll build that for you. Certainly want to recognize the board, Bill Super here, David Jacobs with Acumen Insurance Solutions, Phil Sullivan with Sullivan McGibbons and Associates, Pete Tentler with Independent Reverse Mortgage Solutions, and Barry Levine at Northern Trust. Without any further ado, and I know you've seen the meeting announcements, and I hope you took a look at the detailed bios for each of our speakers. But Stacy and Kelly are going to address preparing the family for the wealth. That was my little insert, but advancing flourishing and with a 10 by 10 learning roadmap. And obviously they're going to be diving in much further, and we're thrilled to have them here. Stacy is nationally noted as one of the people planners in the country, member of the Purposeful Planning Institute, FFI, High Net Worth, whatever that group is, but a national expert. We're thrilled to have her. Kelly Arrillaga is a managing director at First Republic Bank, and she's joined First Republic in 2019. Previously, she was in kind of the trust world, fiduciary specialist, and now she's moved over into this more interesting world of the people side of planning. Without any further ado, Stacy, Kelly.
All right. Thank you all this morning for being here. And thank you to the people on Zoom. We're going to try to make sure that we don't forget that you're out there. But we thought we'd really start with a story this morning to give you a little bit of framing before we get into the 10 by 10, but also to give you a little bit of preview for your table activity. You'll see that there's a large piece of paper and some sticky notes. Don't be afraid when we get there, but hopefully this gives you a little bit of a preview of the types of things that we'll be talking about with that. So to start with the story, and this is an actual client that we're working with. It's a 35-year-old woman who, prior to her father passing away, had some grounding in values of hard work, giving back to the community, and having a real sense of, I would say, authentic self. But what she didn't receive was any transparency into exactly what she would be receiving down the line. And that included very complex structures, both trust structures as well as a business entity that had an underlying real estate portfolio that she'd had no visibility into from her entire life. So we got to the point where these trusts started distributing to her based on age attainment outright. And it became really clear that she needed to have a voice at the table and be an empowered steward versus just, a steward that has well-meaning and strong values. How does she have that voice at the table, both with regards to the business, but they also had a charitable foundation for the company, which she felt really strongly about. So it became an exercise in what do we need to do to make you an empowered steward and an empowered beneficiary? And in looking at that 10 by 10 model, and with her input on where's my energy, where are my priorities, it became very clear that first step was, what does it mean to be an excellent beneficiary? So going into, here are the different roles of the different trustees. What questions should I be asking? What reporting should they be giving to me as I'm the beneficiary? And understanding, things like, how are they getting paid? How is the underlying trust portfolio performing? All of those things that beneficiaries don't typically know to ask until the time comes and they're in the middle of it. So we went through really an educational process from that standpoint, but along the way also became very ingrained in having her understand the different governance structures that were in place for the business, how she was going to be able to have a voice, and then what role did she want to have in the family, the charitable foundation. So I think as you hear a little bit more of the stories that we'll be sharing, this is a really good example of, okay, let's have a plan, let's have a roadmap and a blueprint for getting you to that point where you feel like an empowered beneficiary. And having that blueprint was the critical piece, and giving her comfort that, okay, this is what my journey looks like. It's not just here I am, what do I do next? Have a plan to get there. So with that, I will pass it over to Stacy.
And what I love about Kelly's story is, in working with so many rising gen throughout the years, a lot of them, the majority of them have this bent of wealth with responsibility, but yet there's kind of this burden on their shoulders that you can see because they want to do right by, kind of this incredible privilege that they have, but they're not exactly sure how to do it or where to start. And so that blueprint comes in. So I'm going to start with just a very quick snippet of my own story. So when I was presenting back in the day, early in my career, I have a master's in tax, CPA, I was at EY, and I would present on topics like AMT and ISOs. I know, really exciting. And I think the CPAs in the room can appreciate that. But I had a purposeful pivot. In the year 2000, I joined another firm, and my role was to design comprehensive financial and estate plans. And I was in the Bay Area. If anyone goes back to 2000 in the Bay Area, the dot-com boom and wealth was being created overnight. For the first time in my career, my clients were no longer my father's age, but my age and younger. And as I was putting so much energy into these analytical financial and estate plans, this comprehensive process, the family's energy, mom and dad's energy, was around the qualitative questions. And one day it was a particular question that was a tipping point for me. And it was, what impact does the wealth have on the motivation of my 22 and 25-year-old? And I thought, enough's enough. If I want to be helpful, I better figure this out. So I picked up the phone and cold called wealth psychologists. It was a very small list, and started asking them all the qualitative questions I was getting. And what I came to really, really appreciate is that we as an industry work strong at estate planning, at financial planning, at tax, investments, but where we were really lacking, and that's why there was so much energy behind it, were these equally important, essential, questions for an integrated approach of the qualitative side. And so, needless to say, my life got a lot more exciting. I no longer present on AMT and ISOs. We present on the human side and this human-centered approach, and every day is a new adventure. So I want to build on that with a very quick story about Rosie. Rosie was third generation, and she recently had received a very large inheritance. And as the saying goes, she did not inherit money, she inherited structures and a series, The estate planners had done an amazing work. I think the estate planning professionals, if you saw this plan, would have a tax crush on what Rosie had inherited. It was so beautifully crafted. But what was missing, once again, was the qualitative, the preparation, the empowerment, that entire side. And so Rosie really struggled with this. She really stepped up, and over many years went from kind of overwhelmed to empowerment. But there were a lot of costs along the way, And she wanted to share her story with this group of wealth creators. The idea was to bring the future to the present, to gain insight so they could make more informed decisions. I didn't expect what happened next. The group of wealth creators were kind of in disbelief that, wait a minute, you mean this money that I've worked so hard for, this amazing gift that I'm giving to you in trust, would be anything but wonderful and would cause, kind of some challenges. And so it was really kind of a reckoning of, they had a dream in funding these trusts. So how do we work through this? Our field is still really evolving. We are learning every day. And I want to kind of share with you at the core of how we're tackling these very complex issues. And let me ask a question of what is the best way to cook an egg? And those on Zoom can also respond in chat. Brandon, how many do we have on Zoom today? Fabulous. And so we're going to interact with you guys too. So who wants to pipe up first? What's the best way to cook an egg? Yes. Fry an egg. Any other opinions? Scramble in the back. Hard boiled. Okay. So you guys are getting the picture, right? It depends. It depends how you like your egg. And as we're approaching navigating the complexity of wealth, we need to pause and realize best practices are really nice and tidy, but they don't work because with the complexity of wealth, we have to get deeper than that and really understand each unique individual. So what is the best way to do this? We have found, okay, great. Maybe we can minimize. Can you click to the next slide for us, Brandon? Okay. So one of the best ways we have found to tackle this goes back to the idea of frameworks. And Charlie Munger has this quote that's kind of gone viral, and some people have like really studied and written books on this idea. But the idea is simple but powerful. And Munger says that when you get information, you need somewhere to hang it on, right? So we need models. We need in our mind these different mental models. And models have to come from multiple disciplines, right? And it's not that hard because there's a certain amount, maybe 80 to 90 models carry most of the worldly wisdom. But it's not that there's no one list that works for everyone, because it depends on the problems that you are trying to solve. So how do you tackle the complexity of wealth? You figure out the problems you're trying to solve, and then you build a toolkit of frameworks that to solve these problems. And then together, right, we know that we need a very dynamic and expansive cognitive toolkit, right? It's the old saying that if you only have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Well, this is where I think kind of the genius in Munger's quote came. And the genius is that our superpower comes with this unique and creative thinking when we combine these different frameworks into a lattice work. So an example of this is I was preparing for a really high stakes meeting. This was with a very significant, sophisticated client, and we were tackling the issue of how much should I give? Anyone tackled that issue with clients? And that's not an easy one to kind of take a holistic, approach to. I have a family right now, and they really would like us to just tell them the answer. If only it were that easy. And so as I was preparing for this, kind of had this insight of all we needed to do was, I'm getting ahead of myself. All we needed to do was take the different frameworks we were working with and stack them together in the right way to answer this more complex question of how much should I give? Okay, so as we're diving more into frameworks, it's important to note the wisdom of British statistician that all models are wrong, some are useful. So it's with that humility that we introduce the mental model of the 10 by 10. So how did we come about developing this? And this is one that we developed in collaboration with Money, Meaning, and Choices Institute. By the way, one of the, psychologists that got cold called back in 2000. And we were working on a governance GPS to kind of try and put some more framework and simplification around governance. And we had the realization that the governance, of course, all falls apart if family members themselves haven't developed the competencies essential to effectively integrating significant financial capital. So then we thought, what are those competencies and where's the roadmap? So we looked high and low. We found pieces of it, right? Jolene Godfrey's done great work in financial education. Their Family Firm Institute has done some some great work with business owner competencies, but we didn't find a comprehensive roadmap. So without kind of fully appreciating, probably a good thing, what we were getting into, we designed the 10 by 10, which is the life, goes across the arc of a life and really appreciates what we were seeing, which is in these later stages, very vibrant, engaged, right? Development, that development doesn't stop, right, when you reach 40, contrary to kind of what popular belief was back in the day before we got the more current research.
All right. One more forward. So one of the really first important reframes that we visit with families is this idea of families who succeed across generations define wealth broadly. It's not just the financial capital. And this can be a real change for a lot of families who spend their time monitoring performance, doing all the tax work, putting all the legal structures in place, but reframing wealth as well-being and attaching to it the different capitals is really an important pivot, because the financial capital then becomes the fuel for social capital, human capital, intellectual capital, and legacy capital. And those are all things around, do we have a transcendent purpose? Are all of my family members flourishing? What are we, how are we communicating as a family? Is there conflict, and how do we resolve it? That's one of the biggest things we see is the skill that nobody teaches you is how to resolve conflict and communicate as a family. So teaching different methodologies there. And then the intellectual capital, how are we sustaining as a learning family and continuing to grow our family's capacity to succeed over multiple generations? So what are the big questions that keep you up at night? And what are the big questions that your clients ask you? Some of the examples that we hear are, where do I even start? Where do I even start talking to my kids about our wealth and what we've built? Or how do I prevent having entitled kids? So how about you as advisors? What are some of the big questions that you hear from your clients that are unrelated to assets, but more related to the qualitative side? Anybody want to share?
How do I teach my children?
Really important. Anybody else want to share? All right. We'll call on people later. All right. So what we discovered was that this is not kind of a one-stop model. This is a lifespan model for a learning family to continue to hit different milestones that correlate with their different life stages, but also correlate with really the different learning capacity at different life stages. And it also takes into account the different pathways and the different strengths of all of the family members. Let's go here. And the biggest thing here is that it can be used to build an education and mentoring program between generations. So the thought of really honoring the tradition of the higher generation, as well as the innovation of the next generation, and being able to balance that and work together in a productive way that, again, forwards the intellectual capital in the learning family. So when we think of the, money as the rocket fuel, the idea is that money can either have that positive effect, it can either promote flourishing, or it can actually cause languishing. And we think of languishing, it's that lack of well-being, lack of motivation and self-esteem, not having the ability to grow and learn. Mental health is a big piece that falls into that languishing, and just kind of muddling through your days. And on the other side, flourishing is that peak of well-being. You have a purpose, you're trying to lead a meaningful life, and you're able to put your passion to work every day. So one way or the other, the financial capital is going to affect either flourishing or languishing. And the idea is, how do we have a roadmap for maximizing the benefits and reducing the challenges along the way? And the idea here, this is one of our favorite sayings, is a both and approach. We've seen a lot of families that have that prevention model. So, I don't want to have my kids have access to money. I'm not going to tell them anything. Okay, that's a little bit extreme on the prevention side. But then the promotional model can also go to the other extreme. And the idea is finding balance between giving them safe steps along the way to start learning and open that door a little bit. It's not kind of an all or nothing. It's a step along the way, kind of that dimmer switch or a rheostat where we're going to start communicating and have a roadmap for it. And we're going to teach you and have that balance of the prevention and promotion.
So let's pause and see any questions so far on any of this, on the 10 by 10. Our slides are showing up a little awkward, but let's keep going. What questions so far?
Struggle to get us to this state of life. And they're very hesitant about doing anything to change that back. So they trust their kids, they love their kids, and they spent a decade or decades trying to get their kids' faith grow as they're meant to, and now maybe they they feel like they're adding a whole other level of dynamic that it's hard for them, much less if they imagine it's really hard for the kids to do.
Mm-hmm.
How do you address that? And you don't need to answer how that makes it worse than
Okay, great comment. So let's spend just a minute on that. And I'll repeat for the Zoom, our Zoom friends here, that this family has done a lot of hard work, right? Over a lifetime. They're in a really ideal spot, and that the kids are doing really well. They're grounded, they're thriving, and essentially they don't want the money, right, to mess things up. And we know that financial capital is an amplifier, right? And as Kelly said, it can amplify for the good, the flourishing. It can also amplify for the bad, the languishing. And Kelly will get into kind of some of the risks of wealth. I would start maybe with the reframe. And the idea of reframing, of course, is so powerful, right? That Daniel Kahneman won the Nobel Prize in economics as a psychologist with this idea. And reframing is instant. When you guys, I imagine many of you were already familiar with J. Hughes' foundational idea of the capitals, that it's not just the real wealth in the family isn't the money, right? But the human, intellectual, social legacy capital. How many of you are already familiar with these concepts of the capitals? Okay. And how many of you, was this a new idea? And for those with a new idea, did it resonate? Anyone want to share that? Like, was there a reframing? Reframing is instant. You catch that and boom. Any instant reframes from that foundational idea? Yes. So this whole idea of shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves, and that's one model, right, where the wealth has kind of amplified and can amplify kind of some of the risks. And where's the model where the wealth has amplified the growth, the development, the well-being? So that model is captured in a 400-page book borrowed from your grandchildren. For those of you that 400 pages is maybe a little long, Dennis Jaffe's wonderful book, and we really recommend it. We worked with him to do an executive summary version of the 400-page book, and we can include that, Bill, in the follow-up links to those pages. Let's get one more comment.
Forward. And one of my questions right now is fertile ground in 40 years. Okay. How do you connect in the continuum, because it's stage,
Mhm.
4 groups going at one time. And that's, this is, this will take steps.
Okay, so look, the 5 and 10-year-olds are the easy ones, right? They're eager and you start with allowance and start with teaching, that money's not all for spending, not all for saving. It's also for investing and sharing. And when do you start philanthropy? When the child learns the word mine, which starts at about age 2. So philanthropy, which was one of these other questions, right? It is one of the best ways. It's like the silver bullet where you can teach lots of skills through philanthropy, through decision making and whatnot. And we'll get into some more examples there. But let me give you one practical idea for age a 5-year-old. There is a fabulous set of books published from Citizen Kid. It's either Citizen Kid or Kid Citizen, one of it, but start with the book, If the World Were a Village of 100, where they break out the demographics, right, of finances into a hypothetical village around the world. Beautiful. Start with the book One Hen. Start with, these are busy times for families. Start with those stories and integrate it into things that they're already doing, which is reading bedtime stories. So, and one of the family members in our 10 by 10 right now is an 8-year-old. So we're having a lot of fun there. Okay, so the 10 by 10 has, of course, 10 competencies and 10 life stages. And here are the 10 competencies. There's 5 external, what you know, your credentials, right? Kind of the knowledge, a lot of what you learn in school. And then there's 5 internal competencies, who you are, your wisdom. And we're finding in today's age of complexity, the internal competencies have become much, much more relevant. So internal competencies, think of the fields of vertical adult development, right? Kind of a psychology of growth and development. One of the ways to amplify those internal competencies is working with a coach, something that I'm personally doing. So as you look at the roadmap, it's about identity. In the early stage, we create identity, we evolve identity, and then we refine identity. And working in synergy, these 10 core competencies collectively provide the framework to elevate the overall capacities of every family member. They focus on the skills that enhance flourishing and they protect against languishing. So if you think of this double-sided cape, right? This is one of the Penn School of Positive Psychology professors' metaphors that I find really sticky. The green side is grow the good, and the red side is keep out the bad. And as Kelly said, it's this both and approach of doing both. Okay, so the bottom line of our mission, right, is inviting people to build a bountiful life. One of the questions we really grappled with was that of motivation. It's one thing to build this whole roadmap, right? And at the end of your slide deck here, you see a slimmed down version of the model. Our marketing friends told us, you need a more simple on-ramp. So the full version is about 4 times as big as this. You have the slimmed down version as kind of an invitation to opt in. And I would say that more than anything, the 10 by 10 roadmap demands a village. It takes a village. So as family members, and we'll get into how the roadmap works, kind of opt in and select what they're interested in, depending on what they pick, you would see who might be a good thinking partner for them, right? So all of this collectively is building capacity to create a bountiful life, or thriving, right? And so Jay Hughes has really challenged us, the father of our field, to really not think of wealth as money, but to think of wealth as well-being. It goes back to the old-fashioned definition of wealth and this broader definition of the capitals. Okay, so let's take a quick look at this. One of the core ideas as we age that has been more recent is the research around positive plasticity, and that our learning and growth doesn't just stop in adulthood, but we have a long ways to go. And this is particularly important with the long life that we're having and the demographic changes in aging. We've been doing a lot of work around the 100-year life. And what does that look like to create a next vibrant chapter? How do we support transitioning business owners that want to have a fun and engaging and meaningful life in that next chapter? And at the core of it, right, is positive plasticity. And it's beyond inborn wired natural talents and luck of the genes, right? We need open-mindedness, resilience, personal agency, and responsibility. And these keys have been described in recent studies on this lifespan psychology as vital to positive plasticity, right? So let's take a look. Kelly's going to walk us through. Now, we've been focused on kind of the individual a little bit. The 10 by 10 learning roadmap is really a 10 by 10 by 10 because each of the competencies have 10 elements to work on as a family, as well as those individual life stages.
All right, so what you'll see here is that one of the first things we realized is that there's no one discipline that's going to have all the answers for these families. And we drew from positive psychology, cognitive development, financial planning, and found that all of these are going to be applicable for our clients, but how is that going to be broken out over the 10 different life stages? So I'm not going to go through every single one of these one by one. And you do have an example on your table for stage 5 as to how all of these external and internal competencies are broken out for that particular life stage. And the other piece that went into this was, of course, kind of our work in the trenches over the years and what our insights learned from different family situations and outcomes taught us about how to build this model. So are there any tennis or pickleball players out there? We are at Loma Santa Fe. Yeah. So unforced errors. What does that mean? Are you stepping over the line in the kitchen when you volley? Are you hitting your serve in the net? What are you doing? Our idea here is, how do we avoid these unforced errors with our families? And what's the recipe? So navigating financial capital is really hard. And part of it is just being a thinking partner and walking alongside families and being able to point out those pitfalls that are going to cause the unforced errors. And building those competencies is one of the best ways that we can do that across the 10 by 10 model. It not only improves their skill building, but builds resiliency along the way so that when that time comes, when you don't have that thinking partner next to you, you'll be able to prevent that unforced error on your own. So to that point, kind of de-risking the ways that family financial capital is used is one of the biggest things that we see and try to guard against, whether it's entitlement, grandiosity, frustration, disruptions in kind of normal emotional and cognitive development, and lack of self-esteem. One of the biggest outcomes that I've seen in my world, so in coming from kind of the trust world and really being in a situation where we would step in as a corporate trustee, and what you have is what you have. There isn't any opportunity at that point to really go upstream and prepare beneficiaries. You're kind of, this is where we are now in a lot of ways. How do I kind of triage the situation to be able to change course, oftentimes with adult beneficiaries? So there might already be entitlement in place. There might already be languishing. And the idea is how do we kind of pivot and reframe? Those experiences are kind of what led me to this role, but I'm thinking about a story, and this is actually one of those pivots. And this is, again, a real client. And the situation was 30-year-old client. Mom and dad had been really backfilling her financial picture, probably for the 10 years leading up to the age she is now. And at the same time, they also weren't really asking her of anything. They would see that her account was getting low and they would just fill it in without saying anything. But there was an expectation on their daughter's part. And what happened was that they became very frustrated that she didn't show any motivation to pull herself up. And we're kind of thinking, well, why would she? You're continuing to backfill her, but not creating any sense of expectation. And when I started meeting with their daughter on a one-on-one basis, what I found was that she actually was feeling that her parents didn't have confidence in her, and they were backfilling because they didn't feel that she was going to be able to support herself. And it had really affected her self-esteem. And that was a big shift for me to understand that perspective from that next generation beneficiary. And what it became was really a coaching relationship to start giving her both the skills and kind of achievable successes over time so that she could take baby steps, feel good about herself, and feel proud when she went back to her parents and said, hey, look, I started a savings account and I have this much money in it. So those are the types of things that we want to be able to guard against. So part of it is not just teaching those skills, but informing our older generation parents of those kids that, hey, you know what, there might be a better way to achieve a more improved outcome with that next generation.
So one of the groups that we've gotten the most enthusiasm about the 10 by 10 model are heads of single family offices, because they're grappling with this need to create capacity and help to support the growth and development of the human capital, the most important capital, right? And so when we were talking about risks earlier this year, I spent some time with Family Office Exchange with a cohort of heads of single family offices. And in talking about the risks that Kelly just talked about, we said, what are some unforced errors that you see? And one of the heads of a very large single family office said, we're one of the unforced errors. Wow, interesting. So what did he mean by that? What he was referring to essentially was the dynamic of support and challenge. Now, both are important, both are vital, but they need to be in balance. So the single family office, right, is at risk for over supporting family members and under challenging. And when I'm doing that, when I'm managing that polarity, right, if I ask, should I support or should I challenge? It's like asking, should I breathe in or should I breathe out? We breathe in for oxygen, we breathe out to release carbon dioxide. They're interdependent, right? It's not an either or, it's a both and, it's a polarity. So we need to get better collectively at finding the right balance between challenge and support. So one of our favorite sayings is the perfect system, right? That comes from the healthcare field of every system's perfectly designed to get the results it gets, right? We have the exact number of COVID cases in the US today because we've designed the perfect system to get that. And if we want more, we know what to do. If we want less, we know what to do. We can pull the different levers, right? And so entitled kids don't just happen. You have to design the perfect system to make that happen. And some of the levers might be, not having high expectations, right? Giving too much too soon, not having the preparation, not, kind of that resilience, over supporting and under functioning. So let me check in. Any questions so far or comments from the group? And Brandon, do we have any comments or questions on the chat?
Yeah, I don't know if it's for this portion. If we talk about the business part of the people you do, how do you build your services? Or how are these services built into your fee structure? It is a separate fee. How do you articulate the value to your family and clients?
Okay, I'll answer this very quickly, and then we can, of course, go offline with our Zoom friend here afterwards. You can email us. Our contact info is in here. Essentially, we are looking to add value to the clients. First Republic, we do have an open system, so work with families outside of that. And there's a certain amount of complementary work that we do to, kind of the biggest clients of our firm. And definitely, if anyone has First Republic clients, please take advantage of that. It's a really nice supplemented thing that the firm is committed to. And then when the scope gets so large, then we charge an out-of-pocket fee. I think, defining value for our work is something that is, relevant to all of us. Jay Hughes really has encouraged the industry of asking the families, what are you doing to invest in your intangible capitals? Families are spending, they're willing to spend on the financial, the management of the financial assets, but the whole thing falls apart if you don't also grow the intangible capitals of the family. And so it's really kind of focusing on that. And we use, there's different tools that we use, like the pre and pro mortem, to help say, 10 years out, you had a disaster scenario. How did that happen? 10 years out, you had a brilliant scenario. How did that happen? And they start to realize the importance of taking steps to grow the intangible capitals. So we could go a lot longer on that. I'll stop there. Any other questions or comments in the room as we move on? Yes. Yeah, really good question. Have we had any luck of measuring the intangible capital? I have a book right now that's called How to Measure Anything, and we're kind of pondering that exact question. Keith Whitaker has done some nice work around, if you look at Wise Counsel Research, his website, Keith and Susan have done some nice work around putting together the balance sheet of the intangible capital and trying to kind of grow and measure it. It is much harder to measure than financial capital, of course, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't try and that we shouldn't pursue that. And I think that's going to be one of the challenges of our field to really make progress, is to get this enhanced commitment of growing the intangible capital. So, and if anyone has ideas around that, please let us know. It's something we're actively working on. Mary Duke and I have written a chapter on the role of the Chief Learning Officer in family offices that will be in a book coming out next year. And we address that. That's part of the topic that we're addressing. Okay. So what unforced errors do you see in families that we can support them to proactively combat? Let's hear maybe one comment in the chat and one comment from here. So remember, the unforced error is something that was preventable, right? With a little planning, right? What's an unforced error you see?
Literally $1 billion family. They never felt or saw themselves as being wealthy. They did find themselves socially outcast to where they didn't have a group of friends or pals to really understand what they were doing. I have a friend of mine, Jamie Prager, who was so I'm well placed here, she's well placed here too. So I got one of her emails that he towards her, going because she was talking about the issues of wealthy families and dysfunction is rampant, and this relationship raised Jamie. So like, who? So I think there's also we're finding that families are dealing with shame because they've been very successful, and then the other issue that I'm starting to explore, how do we get overcome, is wealthy families got to where they are, but they didn't get the training themselves because it's typically first generational wealth. So they didn't have to learn anything. And they turned out pretty well. So what should they do, or why should they do anything with their kids? So I think that's a lot of things that we're looking right there. But those are some of the issues we're struggling with. Addressing issues and really get some meaningful conversations with their generation.
Yeah, really good points. So, okay. Let me respond to this. Any of these questions are there's so many layers to this. We could spend like an hour on that, but I'll give like a 1-minute response, and then let's go to the Zoom question. So you remind me of a client that I met years back, kind of an oil and gas guy from Montana that grew up eating like canned soup. And he said, I don't view myself as wealthy, right? I feel much more comfortable with the people hanging the lights at my home at the Yellowstone Club than my next door neighbor. And in thinking about it, I responded of whether or not you choose to acknowledge it, you are wealthy, right? You have significant financial capital, and the impact that financial capital will have impact on you, your family, and your community. And the question becomes, do you want to be intentional about that impact or leave it to chance? And then I also started traveling with, kind of the stats to like prove out, this was my like analytical mind working, that, what percent of wealth holders are you in? And then I came to appreciate that it wasn't really that analytical, thing. It was a change in identity, right? And if you look at the stages of wealth identity, it was coming to acceptance that I'm in this situation now. And depending on the family of origin, on the money messages there, we had one client who, his family hated the rich. There was a lot of disdain about them. And now suddenly he was rich. And so he was trying to hide it. And oh gosh, the angst that caused. And so it's, how do I don't want to feel guilty. I don't want to feel entitled. I want to feel empowered. And part of this learning journey is moving to empowerment. And Jamie Traeger Murray is doing some really interesting work right now on fiscal diversity, where the female has inherited wealth and the impact of that on relationships. So I would say our field it's still a very niche field. We are really growing in terms of the combined, intellectual capital to tackle these complexities. And it does take a village. Brandon, what's our Zoom question?
How do you get 20-year-olds interested in a single family office? If they are interested, how to get them involved?
So you have to make it so fun and compelling that they choose to be part of it. And that's not easy to do, but think about yourself as an experienced designer, right? Kind of the whole system. It needs to be an opt-in approach. It reminds me of one family where the parents didn't want to have family meetings. If done right, this is a cornerstone practice that really is a game changer. And so finally, the siblings decided we're going to meet on our own and start learning and growing and building skills. And then guess what happened? The parents eventually said, could we attend your family meeting? And yes, they were very pleased to invite the parents, the wealth creators, to this family meeting. And so it's like kind of the Kevin Costner, if you build it, they will come, but you have patience, you make it compelling. You're not in judgment, you're in curiosity. And I'll share one quick example. We had designed a system of earn, save, spend, invest, and share. And in the share portion, every family member got $25,000 a year, use it or lose it, to give money away from the family foundation. And they had also said, we want time involved too. So it's money, you're unlocking this capital and you're also giving your time. And for a couple of years in a row, one of the 20-somethings didn't opt into that. And you could kind of see the judgment, and we can't hold both curiosity and judgment at the same time. So I would say, it's easy to get into judgment, be judgmental, but go back to curiosity, ask those questions, right, from a neutral standpoint. And then one year he came with this amazing plan and brought clean water to Haiti with a solar powered well, done all the research, kind of blew the socks off everyone. And then he was ready. And then from there on out, he always used his allocation. So you keep the invitation open. Okay. So I'm going to move on here. So how exactly does the 10 by 10 work? Well, what we do, and I'll go over this quickly. At your tables, you're going to have a chart. We're going to move into the table group here in just a second, but this is kind of previewing how we use the model. You read through the competency chart. You look at what is your life stage for this is the individual. You read through the competency charts. You kind of note what is relevant now, and then you prioritize down to your top 1 to 3. You build an action plan, and then it's like rinse, lather, repeat. So this is the inventory at this life stage across 10 core competencies on the front and back. And you say, what's relevant? We want it to be self-authored. And then you choose that. So I'm going to turn it back over to Kelly for our activity.
All right, so you should have stage 5 on your table, double-sided there. And for those of you on Zoom, if you go to page 33 or 34, that's where you'll find this overview of the competencies. But the first step is channel a client that you work with in stage 5, or kind of ages 26 to 35, and read through the activities and think about, what looks interesting to me? What of these activities are things that I could commit to? And as you're thinking about this, what might be most relevant and help that client, if you're channeling them, elevate the way that they're participating in the family. So we're going to give you 2 or 3 minutes to kind of go through this, select your different priorities, and then we'll come back and have a little discussion. And for those of you on Zoom, we'll make sure that you're able to participate on chat as well. 33 and 34 for them. Oh, it's not, it's further back. On the handout.
This one?
Yeah. Yep.
Should we have the participant chat?
Yeah.
Okay, 1 minute warning. Please wrap up the discussions and then we'll come back together as a group.
How small resonate for you, it's like and all of the
Great. Okay. Brandon has released me from the podium with the traveling mic. So we'd love to hear very quickly, we are down to 10 minutes. So very quickly, we would love to hear from two tables, and then we will have about another 5 minutes of prepared comments. And then we're going to do a lightning round the last 5 minutes. We will end promptly just a few minutes before 9 to turn it. Is 9 o'clock our ending time, Bill? Oh, 9:10. We will take that 10 minutes because the lightning round, I think you guys will find, is one of the funnest parts of the day. Okay, which table, there was a lot of flow going on in here. Which table wants to comment? Any themes or observations that came up in the dialogue?
Oh, thanks.
Stand up.
Oh, I have to stand up.
Disposition of assets.
Okay. All right. I'm on the spot here. Hi. I think the conversation our table was having is at this age, some of the planning has started to designate ages where they start getting a little tranche of money at age 25 or 30 or 35. So you see kids either receiving a piece of wealth and not knowing what to do with it, and then having a conversation with their family or advisors about what to do with that money. So sometimes you see in that first instance, they're already getting money, or they're becoming their own trustee. And so some of the planning I've seen is they're looking a little bit later now at 30, 35, 40, because they're not quite ready at the 25 or even 30-year-old ages. So having the conversation with them with the idea that potentially they're going to be coming into this wealth, and also figuring out the best educational functions in order to teach them how to manage the wealth. And in some cases, being their own trustee, which is a really advanced concept. Like, now you're coming to this money and you're going to be responsible for this money as well. So we were having the conversation about that, and also saying that it's very difficult for parents to discuss that with their children, because children tend to not want to listen when they're having those conversations. And it's so vital to have other professionals and advisors speaking to them, but not just speaking to them, but also feeling that they're interested and that they're engaged, that they're not just speaking to the children of the primary wealth originators, but as trying to look at them as, yes, you are in this now in this wealth mode, and really trying to be engaged with them, rather than saying, okay, you're just the kid and you're coming to this money, but trying to engage them so that they're more interested in learning about the process.
Love that. Excellent points. Lots of insights packed into there. And, Newton's law, things in motion tend to stay in motion. Find one thing you can do to move forward, right? And then add on that, build on that. And it's interesting what happens when it becomes, right, when learning becomes a tradition and you create a learning family. Okay. Let's hear from one other table. This table over here had a lot of discussion. Larry, I'm reacquainted with an old friend, so I'll call him Larry.
Sure, thanks. We actually focused a little bit more on the internal competencies sheet, and I just gave a real life example from one of my clients, because I have a client currently who's in a second marriage, kids from a first marriage. She has 2 kids from a first marriage as well. They've been married for 24 years, and they have a number of assets that they consider community property, but that are not. And so they went to their attorney and they got 3 potential plans. And the plan that they decided on was, unfortunately, the all or nothing plan, which meant they were going to decide to reassign all the separate property to community property and divide it in half. Problem with that is that most of the wealth was created by the father, who has 5 children, and she has 2. So I said, that's great. That's the simple plan. That's the cheapest plan. But you might want to reach out to your son and find out how they feel about having now splitting that estate in half with the other 2 kids. Because I said, you've named your son a successor trustee. So you're putting him in the position of being, not only being the messenger of this new plan, but the recipient of less wealth than perhaps he would have had prior to that. So the nice thing is that the client was actually open to that. He could have taken the all or nothing. I said, you can just change the plan and communicate that it's your wealth. I said, but you're down the road, you're going to have this issue of the children coming together and probably having some sort of major disagreement over it. So I'm glad that he's open to it. We've scheduled a call with the son, and my objective is to try and go over the other two plans that the attorney suggested, so that we can kind of find some middle ground.
Thank you, Larry, and lots of internal competence needed for that. I might suggest the work of Christine Blondell has done a lot of work on fair process and, kind of that whole thorny issue and delicate issue of, fair versus equal, and the strong desire to retain family harmony and not have money get in the way of that. And fair process can be an interesting thing to dive into. So great. Well, we will keep, we could, this is such a rich discussion. One time I was presenting, and literally 2 minutes before the start, I found out I had 4 hours instead of 2. And after getting over the initial shock, it was like one of my very favorite, workshops. And I wish, Bill, we had more time, because we could keep going here. But in service to ending at 9:10, let me spend just a couple minutes with a quick case study. I'm going to go through this quickly, and then we're going to end with lightning round. Okay. So I'd like you to meet Natasha. She was invited, as you were, to select 1 to 3 priorities to work on now, if she chose to opt into the learning journey. As she did that, she reviewed her life stages, the internal, the external for stage 5, and she came up with these three priorities. The one was impact of money on relationships. She was about to get engaged, and she knew that her family wanted her to get a prenuptial agreement. The second thing was around family decisions. She was third generation, and she knew she would be needing to make decisions with her cousins. And so she opted into that one. And then the last one was around exploring responsibility to others. Like many in her generation, she was really grappling with the privilege she had, and how do I do kind of justice to this and feel comfortable with it, right? And she was very community oriented. She was a change maker. So on impact of money on relationships, here's what we did. Through some coaching conversations, we started with, what conversations have you already had, right? And what did you learn? Well, it turns out during the pandemic, she had played Ask Me Anything with her, at that time, partner, right, before they were engaged. And she casually brought up the idea of the prenup, that it's something her family wanted, and would he be willing to sign it? And the answer was yes. So she already learned that, she'd already broached the topic, which is nice, in advance. We shared with her Michelle Macasa's work around, this is a trust and estate article some of you might have seen, which looks at fiscal diversity when she has the money, and has a 5-step process for navigating that more skillfully. We know that that's a tricky dynamic, and it requires skills. So let's learn from other people instead of trying to do things behind closed doors. We had a discussion around what are her value statements, values in general, and values around the earning, saving, spending, and sharing of money. This was over a series of one-on-one coaching conversations. And then we brought in, at this point, the fiance. We asked, what are her feelings behind this, and what are the needs behind the feelings? Feelings should not be swept under the carpet. Feelings need to be managed. We manage feelings by naming them. We can be more effective if we have a higher degree of emotional literacy. So we actually provide a chart with Mark Brackett from Yale Center for Emotional Learning. We provide that chart and say, how are you feeling about this? And ask them to name it, and then go a step deeper. What are the needs behind your feelings? We gave some resources, right? This is an important thing. It requires having some skin in the game and doing some of the work. And then we move down to kind of that second thing. So essentially, as Kelly used the term thinking partner before, that's what we're doing. Okay, we're going to do this at the very end. So I'm going to go back to quickly the lightning round, and this is going to have to be quick. But what I'm hoping with the lightning round, this could become a fun tradition for you guys. How many of you have done lightning rounds before? Okay, one. Okay, so very quickly, this is to harness the wisdom of the crowd. And in the chat, our Zoom friends will harness the wisdom on Zoom. I want you to think about all of the helping families navigate the opportunities and challenges of wealth. What are any of the questions, comments, ideas you have about that would be helpful to have a group discussion on? Put it on the stickies and then come and put it on this table group. And then we're going to choose a couple of them very quickly. And lightning round, we're going to harness the wisdom of the crowd with some quick ideas. And we'll spend you have 1 minute time to come up with your stickies. And then we'll have about 4 minutes for each lightning round. We hope to do 2 of them. Okay, is that clear? You're coming up with at least 1 or more questions around opportunity or ideas around opportunities and challenges of wealth. Please do it in the form of a question, because then we're going to discuss it. Okay. Write 1 or more questions on the opportunities and challenges of wealth, and then stick it up here.
Sorry, I gotta go early.
Thank you for your engagement.
Read it, or you want me to write it down with a sticky and put it up here?
Stickies, that would be awesome. Oh,
Or a pen.
okay, hold on.
Sticky and pen, I can do it.
Thank you, Brandon. Okay, please finish writing your question and come post it.
You want me to read?
Okay, 10 seconds. Any other stickies? What's your name?
Mike.
Okay, we have invited Mike to read the stickies on this poster and choose one that he would like you to answer. Okay, lightning round is fast. We want your insights, but we want them fast, hence the name lightning round. Okay, Mike, what question?
All right, so the question I've chosen is, how can a young adult start the process of learning about their family's wealth?
Okay, and then we're going to pop the microphone over. Who has an idea for that? And it's like popcorn, boom, 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 boom. What are your key insights fast? Does everyone understand lightning round? It's a question. We harness the wisdom of the room. So the question Mike asked, again, how can a young adult start the process of learning about wealth? It came from you guys. Okay, who wants to start?
So first of all, it's asking them what is the questions that they want answered, and then having a time of a retreat where it's fun, both in the morning, they're doing something as the family, but in the afternoon, they go doing something that is fun as a family.
I like that. It's kind of understanding the question behind the question, right? Getting to them to tailor. Yes.
Learn about the family business and learn about the family philanthropy.
In philanthropy, the most neutral of all places to start. What about you guys? Ideas?
Social responsibility and what they're so they're not entitled, but that they learn to give back.
So gratitude and giving back is kind of the antidote for entitlement. So to create the perfect system for those grateful.
Agreed. No, saying this is what we're talking about.
Okay, that's the theme over here. Yes.
Ask them to read some books. Some
Okay.
both related books.
And maybe curate like we did with the prenups. Here's 3 choices, right? Podcasts, videos. Okay. Let's do one other before we close out. Kelly, why don't you choose one of these? As Kelly's choosing, I'm going to read a few of the questions. So you guys kind of, these also provide interesting things for online collaboration. How do we encourage building economic independence separate from family wealth? Right? How your wealth can make a difference in your commitments, I think that is.
All right. And this one is how to build the necessary leadership skills to take over in the business. All right.
I'll give one idea and then I'll give you back the mic to see what the room has. Family Firm Institute has this 2086 report, and it is the best piece I have seen on building competencies in family-owned businesses. It is literally 60 pages, and it's the framework of building those owner competencies. It's written by 4, I think they're all professors internationally, one's in North Carolina, but Family Firm Institute 2086 report, very good.
Anyone care to take a stab at that question? How to build leadership skills to take over? Any insights? Buddy?
We've had some success with just immersion, finding out what a younger member of the family is interested in, what's compelling to them, and then give them the task of actually doing it. And there's forced and unforced errors, and errors are never bad because you usually learn something. The important thing is to stay out of their way when you delegate, make sure they don't go off the rails, but allow them to do it themselves. And that's where we're having some success in building that next generation, just by actually delegating it to them, making them responsible for it, and then being loving and kind and open-minded with what they come up with.
I love that idea that errors aren't bad. I mean, sometimes those are the transformational experiences that will propel you forward. Anybody else want to take a stab at this question?
I kind of wonder, okay, leadership is a hard thing. And if you're trying to teach leadership, examples are really important, to have good leaders present in the process. And so if the matriarch or patriarch themselves aren't great leaders, then others need to come into the circle. And so I would try to combine, leadership tasks with leadership examples and bring them in if you can find them.
I think that mentoring idea is important, especially because it takes away some of the emotion behind learning from a patriarch or a matriarch who might have a certain way of doing things. We do suggest that with kind of the multi-gen business families that we're working with. Try to find that advisor that can give you that input and model the behavior, and then you can still have your parent-child relationship with the business owner. All right.
Kind of the 9:10 stop time. So we will end with this. We encourage you, as you're driving back to your offices, to think about what changed for you? Like the reflection, we don't learn from doing, we learn from reflecting on what we're doing. So we invite you to reflect on what changed for you, what squares with your thinking, and what's still circling for you. Okay, and with that, thank you so much for your wonderful engagement. And we'll turn it back over to Bill.
Thank you so much, Stacy and Kelly. What a fantastic presentation. And of course, you've learned everything now and you can go back to your clients and take this onward. Obviously not, there's so much in here. We're talking about certainly one of the national experts in this broad world. And as you can tell, there really is a team that kind of comes together to help in this process, but you have at least a great starting point. Good to know that you all will work with kind of non-First Republic clients. We all need the help in kind of passing on this great information in what I call preparing the family for the wealth. So our November first meeting is going to be a good one with Dustin Nichols of Brown and Straza in Irvine, going to be speaking on the private retirement trust, which is a very interesting piece that Dustin was one of the people that invented this, and it's relevant to just really the state of California folks. But thanks so much for coming. Get back to me if you need some more information. The council has kind of the 50 top books that kind of revolve in this big area. So Stacy and Kelly will certainly be available for other follow-up if you have any questions. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.